Hello again, and welcome again to week one of Embracing Emotions, God's Gifts for Thriving. So, before I get started on this week's material, I just want to mention that there is a document, a Word document, that has an outline of what I will be covering in this video. So if it would be helpful to you to pull it up or to print it and have it in front of you while you're listening, feel free to pause this and to go ahead and do that. And also, it's absolutely not necessary to do that, and you can simply listen. So, the beginning. We come into this world trailing clouds of glory. Saint Irenaeus, a second century mystic and theologian, said, "The glory of God is a human being fully alive." And in that fullness of humanness is Jesus. Jesus is the most fully alive human, reflecting the glory of God that there ever was. And when he was asked the question of what is the greatest commandment, which is a question I so appreciate, especially in our modern world with 24/7 everything, which is vying for our attention, basically the question is like, what is the one thing? If I just attend to this one thing, uh, what is it that is the most important? And then everything else will just kind of flow out of that. And Jesus says, and this is in Mark 12, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. And you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind and all your strength. And the second is this, you shall love your neighbor as yourself." So these two commandments, and really there's implicitly three commandments because it's loving God, ourselves, and our neighbors, is all about love and relationship. And it's about bringing our full humanness to that, and that there is then the glory of God is revealed in that. So in our world, not all of our humanness is welcomed. Some parts of ourselves, parts of our humanness are more welcome than others. So for most of us, our intellect, our minds are really welcomed. For those of us who grew up in faith communities, perhaps our souls or our spirits were also welcomed. Though I would say that the way that was welcomed was often in a very intellect-oriented way. It was very cognitive. It was about learning lessons and values and, just really engaging our intellects. But our emotions and our bodies, our hearts and our strength were not so welcomed, and were often considered to be things that were perhaps even dangerous. So that they had to be disciplined and they had to be really guarded and managed and perhaps even considered as a problem that needed to be solved. So to have our full humanness welcomed, which is when the glory of God is reflected, then is really moving away from that and receiving the full heart, soul, mind, and strength of ourselves. And that when this is brought together, that there is something more that emerges, that the full imago Dei, the reflection of the glory of God, then is expressed and available. So, with our human design, all these elements of who we are, and with these two elements, emotions and body, that are in many spaces not as welcomed or perhaps even exiled, uh, there really isn't a choice about whether we have them or not. They just are, they're just part of our design. Our only choice is how we respond to them. How do we think about them? How do we treat them? How do we engage with them? Are they problems, weaknesses that need to be managed, to be disciplined, perhaps so dangerous that they need to be just almost locked up for some of us? Or are they something else? Are they really part of our humanness that will be part of reflecting the glory of God? So, in formation, uh, spiritual formation and enculturation. So, spiritual formation, or in some circles, maybe it'd be called discipleship, there is this intentional forming of a person. Now, God claims us in our entirety, but in that claiming, God is not the only force that is claiming us. There are also other forces that are at work that are vying for um, our attention, our allegiance, our loyalty, our energy, our resources. And this is true from the moment that we're born. So, the way that formation and so I just so spiritual formation is really about whole person formation, and from the moment we are born, there are forces that are trying to form us as what it means to be human, or how to live as a human. And another word for it is enculturation. So culture is values, behaviors, and perspectives of a group of people. This could be family, a larger community, an ethnic community, a church, a school, a group. And these guide the members of a group on what to believe, what to value, how to treat one another, and how to treat others that are not part of the group. They set the conditions and qualifications for membership in the group. They set the benefits for being part of the group. And they also set what the expectations are for and the duties of people in the group. Now, again, part of our human design is we need to be connected. We are inherently relational, and we have a need to belong, and that is just part of the Trinity. The Trinity, 3 in 1, 1 in 3, is inherently relational. And further, because we are embodied human beings, we need to have a basis or kind of a way for living that out, living out our connectedness. And so this is part of enculturation and these norms. Enculturation happens unconsciously. It's absorbed. It's just part of daily life, and it is just what feels normal. That is just what we're exposed to. This what life is like. It is a full human experience. It engages our intellect. It engages our spirits or our souls. It engages our emotions. It engages our bodies. This enculturation. Now, so as so far, I've said that this is just what we need. We need these ways of being together, establishing values, perspectives, behaviors, etc. So it's not necessarily a bad thing. However, when culture is shaped by unresolved trauma and hierarchy. Generally, the culture is more rigid and it's more domineering. And it makes uh, less room or little room, or sometimes almost no room, for the individual, for individual uniqueness and also for change. And our uniqueness is part of our God design. Uh, there is no one else in the history of the world that is alive now or that will ever be that is exactly like you. And you add to that the uniqueness of what your life experience is. And all that uniqueness that God has poured into you is part of the glory of God and is meant to be offered and is needed in this world. So when we are in groups, though, that don't allow for that, and therefore don't allow for that uniqueness to speak into uh, the dynamism and growth and organicness of what is meant to be human individually and in groups, then there is something seriously wrong there. There are cultures that are characterized as more inherently collective and those that are more inherently individual. And sometimes these are pitted against each other as either or. But I would say it's a both and that the Apostle Paul, when he talks about the body of Christ, captures that really beautifully. He talks about um, the faith community as a body, with Christ as the head and all of us as members thereof. And each member is very unique, and yet in that uniqueness it adds to this whole mechanism, this whole system of which is the body. And for most of us, we don't have many experiences of that, where there is this dynamic whole that is very diverse, that is hearing and responding to the uniqueness of the parts and is still held together in this one. Really, it's the Trinity. It's the uniqueness of Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, all working as and pouring in and into each other and loving as one. So, so we end up then either in spaces where we're so individual we are almost cut off and isolated, or in a collective where the having to be this rigid sameness almost is suffocating. And I believe God is inviting us to the both and. Now, children are particularly vulnerable, and they inherently, I believe, intuitively know that they can't survive without being part of a whole. And so the force and pressure on them to be whatever the group is saying, even if they don't fit, that what is inherent in them doesn't necessarily fit what the norm of the group is, that pressure is huge. And so they end up getting separated from significant parts of themselves. So, so in a conversation with one person who grew up in a family who had experienced a lot of social trauma, war, and social chaos, very stoic family, he was told in a very intense encounter with his father when he was 10 stopped crying. He is now in his 50s and he has not cried since. So sometimes this formation is a direct verbal. Another person said that in her community, and she grew up in a faith community, that when she did something that wasn't in line with what was expected of her as a girl, one of the women would kindly and with great good intention lean over and say to her, honey, we don't do that. Now, that was okay if that was something she really, when she looked at herself, didn't really want to be invested in doing. But it threw her into great turmoil when what we would do was not what she deeply desired and what rose up in her to do. For me, some of the most powerful formation happened non-verbally. I remember a time when I was probably around 6 and I was lost in a store and I was so upset. I was so scared. I started to cry. My father found me and he just took me by the arm. He did not comfort me. He just took me by the arm and went and found my mother and then just handed me over to her. And that wasn't necessarily, didn't give me any more comfort because she also didn't comfort me. And they were not bad people. They truly loved me. But my distress, my fear, my panic at being lost, my tears overwhelmed them. They did not know how to be with me in my fear, in my panic, in my distress. And so a lesson I learned was that to express my fear, to express sadness, to express any kind of emotion where I would need support from them would just overwhelm them. And so I learned that to support the family and to support them, I needed to push it down. Now, did that ever get said to me? Absolutely not. Was that what my parents wanted? Absolutely not. They had themselves experienced a lot of trauma. They had lived through a very significant period of time in China's history where there was a lot of social unrest. They had lived through war. They had lived through immigrating to the US, where they landed in a place where they were absolutely not welcomed. So they had a lot that they had not been able to process, resolve, come present to, and have healed. Did they have time? Not really. They were just trying to survive. So I have such great admiration for their courage and their strength and it's because of them that I am alive. And also, they did not give me the emotional resources that I needed, that were actually part of being able to call forward and to nurture and develop this part of my humanness, my emotions. Both are true. So anyway, that is just what happens when we are enculturated or we are formed in ways that, not because anybody intends it, not because we're not loved, not because there is not some amazing people in our lives, but it's just what results from living in a world that is broken, in a world where some people have suffered way more than God would have ever intended, where there are people who their attention is on survival, and they give what they can, and there's a goodness to it, and there's some enoughness to it, but there's also some really not enoughness to it. And so this is where we are, and God meets us with that. So in this course with emotions, which is, in my mind, a stepping into receiving once more our full humanness. It's a reformation, or a beginning to learn a new response to our emotions, a part of our humanness, so that our full imago Dei and the reflection of the glory of God can be more and more restored and evident. And I would say it's a new old response, because it's, I believe, part of what we actually came with originally, that got deformed. So the process then that we will be going through is that we will need to be bringing to consciousness simply what is. As I said, a lot of cultural formation is unconscious, and we can't work with it there. So we have to bring it to consciousness. And then, as we're conscious to it, then we can choose, we can discern what we're going to let go of and what we're going to build afresh. This really is, when you look at the Psalms, the prayer book of Israel, and of a huge part of our sacred scriptures, our Bible, is that there are psalms of orientation, disorientation, reorientation. It's kind of that rhythm that we are oriented, we're settled in how we were formed. It was a way that we learned how to work and to be and to act. Then there's this unsettling, this needing to let go of, disorientation, and now we are, and then the leaning into the new, the reorientation. So that's kind of what our process is. We're this week we are going to really be looking at our practices are about, like, where are we? Where are we starting? And every week we are going to be looking at kind of what is, looking at trying to bring it to consciousness, and then working with it and making some choices, perhaps releasing some things, embracing some things anew. So this week, one of the things we're looking at in our reading in the Language of Emotions workbook is the 4 keys of emotional genius, or to emotional genius. And two of the keys that are the most, uh, well, all of them are significant, but the first one in and of itself is just like a real game changer. There are no negative emotions and there are no positive emotions. Basically, it's saying that emotions are simply emotions, part of our human design to help us to live well. And it's not really an intellectually complex concept, but in terms of its challenge to how most of us, if not all of us, have been formed, which is there are good emotions, bad emotions, there are ones to avoid, there are those that are sinful, there are ones that absolutely, we uh, are evidence of goodness. So this would be peace and contentment and joy. The ones that would indicate that there's something wrong with us, is that we're fearful, or we're angry, or we're sad. Um, so anyway, um, this first key to emotional genius, there are no negative emotions or positive emotions, is is a game changer, not so much because it's so intellectually complex, but because it really does speak right into the heart of what how many of us have been formed. That there's so many emotions that are problems or need to be managed, or they're problems that need to be fixed. They're not simply part of our human design and part of the Imago Dei and the part of uh, our reflecting the fullness of the glory of God. The fourth one, learning how to channel our emotions, that is simply saying that that is a way of learning how to work with our emotions, to listen to them, to be present to them as part of our full humanness, trusting that they have a wisdom to give to us, an insight that will help us to live more fully human. So rather than repress, which I learned, I was master repressor, or for some of us, we learn to express, that we just kind of let it all out. And again, we're not listening to them. They're not embraced as part of a full humanness. But it's just managing techniques, coping techniques, because the emotions are there and we have to do something with them. So there's no, so we don't learn something else. And for many of us, I did not. So anyway, that is going to be one of the things that we are going to be really pressing into, is learning these different ways that we can potentially channel our emotions. Channel being not some strange spiritual thing, but channel simply being the Webster's dictionary definition of channel, which is with intention to move something from one place to another. And so with the power of emotions, rather than to allow them to flood or to dam them up, that we are going to be building irrigation canals so that we can move them with intention from one place to another, and let fruits and vegetables and all kinds of things be grown out of our lives. So that's it for this week, and I look forward to seeing you on the forums, and also seeing you and meeting you at the Zoom.